Uh-huh. Tomorrow is one of the holiest days in the Christian calendar, but in defiance of guidance from the CDC and stay-home orders from some governors, some churches are still planning on opening their doors, as if there is no global pandemic at all, or worse, in defiance of that reality. Joining me now is Reverend Raphael Warnock, a senior pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church, who's also running for the U.S. Senate as a Democrat in Georgia. And good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good to be here with you, Joy.
Thank you so much. Let me start by playing Donald Trump. And this was he was asked about his original, sort of prognostication that he wanted to have the country opened back up by Easter. He was asked about that at one of his recent daily press conference reality show editions. Here we go.
I had a date, and I thought it was a very aspirational date. It's turning out to be very interesting because a lot of good things are happening by Easter. But I had a very aspirational date. I didn't think we could make it. I didn't say we would do it by Easter, but I said, boy, wouldn't that be great to shoot for Easter? That would be a great day, beautiful day, very important day to a lot of people like me and like some of you in the room, maybe all of you in the room, frankly.
And Pastor Warnock, if that even makes sense to you, that's all well and good, except that a lot of people are listening, and a lot of people who are conservative, particularly in the white Christian community, are listening to Donald Trump and taking their cues for him. Item, out of Wichita, House and Senate leaders in the state of Kansas, meeting as a body, called the Legislative Coordinating Council, voted along party lines to throw out the directive by their governor to close the state and to include churches. The decision came as the number of reported COVID-19 cases in the state climbed to more than 1,000, and the death count ticked up to 38. Church gatherings have produced 3 case clusters across the state, and health officials fear Easter gatherings can further spread the disease. What do you say to Christian communities? You run a church, you're the head of a church, that are insisting on meeting on Easter.
I say that my faith has no quarrel at all with science, and the church is not the building. The church is the people. And so let every home be a sanctuary and let every soul be safe. The fact of the matter is faith leaders really ought to be leading the way. After all, this is Holy Week. Holy Week is a story within a story about how to survive a pandemic. Ironically, the story of Passover, which Jesus goes into Jerusalem to celebrate along with other Jews at the beginning of this week, is a story about a people overcoming oppression and injustice. And in the midst of that struggle, a pandemic, a plague emerges, and there comes a divine directive to shelter in place until the Passover, until the pandemic passes. And so our spiritual ancestors have taught us how to survive a pandemic. We ought not worship the building. We need people to be safe. We ought to always be taking this seriously so that when the time comes, we can gather and celebrate our faith and the God who gives us the promise that death and sickness will never have the last word. That, after all, is the message of Easter.
Well, and there is a sense, and amen to that, and thank you for that lesson for those who are unfamiliar with the story. Part of this does feel like it's also not so much worshiping the building, but worshiping a political ideology, because you have some pastors out there that are having meeting as a church be an act of defiance against, I don't know, the libs, that this is some sort of liberal plot against Donald Trump personally, and so that the pandemic isn't real, it's just a plot against Donald Trump. And so that meeting is some way of showing fealty to him. That strikes me as quite dangerous. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it strikes me as a faith leader as a form of idolatry. And I think this is what we get, Joy, when for decades now we've had this movement against government and the idea that government doesn't have a role. And when you give people that kind of dogma and doctrine year after year, it has implications. It has, in this case, tragic consequences. We need people to be safe. We need people to take this seriously. This is why my church has found ways to worship creatively in this space. A week ago, I sat in this same place right here in my home, and I conducted a funeral for one of my parishioners, and the entire service was conducted on a Zoom virtual platform. If you had told me a few years ago that I'd be conducting an entire funeral on a virtual platform, I would not have understood. But this is where we are. A funeral should not produce other funerals. We should not lose lives trying to celebrate a life. Churches tomorrow will be empty, but so is the grave. That's what our faith teaches us. And we have to fight the good fight. We need government in this moment to do its job. We need much more testing than we're seeing going on in our country. And we need to make sure that our healthcare workers and our essential workers, people who are on the front lines of providing service and a service economy, have the protections that they need at a time like this.
Yeah, amen to all of that. I want to wish you in advance a happy Easter. Thank you so much, Reverend Raphael Warnock. Good luck in your campaign as well. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And coming up, thank you so much. And coming up, the fight to bring voting